The Wire has a reputation as a show where nobody wins, which is the kind of thing people say when they have decided a story is serious. It is also wrong because the show does have winners, and figuring out who they are tells you exactly what the series believes about the world. The problem is that you cannot answer the question until you decide what winning means, and The Wire deliberately hands you three different definitions that do not agree with each other. It lets each one look reasonable in turn. Then it shows you what each one costs. So the honest way to do this is to take all three seriously, see who comes out on top under each, and see what the differences tell us. Start with the simplest definition, the one most people use without noticing. Winning means you are alive at the end, you are free, and you have money. Under that rule, the list of winners is short, specific, and unpleasant. Marlo Stanfield walks. His lawyer builds him a deal that ends the case, and he ends the series a wealthy free man in a room full of developers. Maurice Levy keeps every client he ever had and is doing better than when we met him. Clay Davis beats his charges completely and is still a state senator, still smiling, still being handed money in a car. Tommy Carcetti becomes governor of Maryland. William Rawls becomes superintendent of the state police. Stan Valchek, a man whose entire contribution to law enforcement was a grudge about a stained glass window, ends the series as police commissioner. Scott Templeton wins a Pulitzer Prize for stories he made up. Herc, fired from the department for incompetence, is working for Levy and earning more than he ever did as police. That is the winner's circle under the first definition, and it is worth staring at because the obvious reading of it is wrong. The easy conclusion is that bad people win and good people lose. But look at what each of those people actually did to get where they are. Templeton gave his newspaper a story it desperately wanted, at a moment when the paper needed something big more than it needed something true. Carcetti gave the city falling crime numbers, which the city wanted much more than it wanted lower crime. Rawls delivered clearance rates. Levy provides something the courts genuinely need, which is a system that keeps functioning and keeps producing convictions and pleas without anybody having to look too closely at how. Valchek was loyal upward for decades and never once caused a problem for a superior. None of them won by beating an institution. Every one of them won by being useful to an institution at the exact moment it needed somebody to help it protect itself from the truth. Their personal ambition and their organization's need to look good happened to point in the same direction, and they rode that alignment all the way up. That is the show's first real answer, and it is more precise than saying the system is corrupt. The system is not rewarding evil. It is rewarding usefulness, and it has been built in such a way that the most useful thing a person can do is help it lie, which is why the good people on that list are missing, and why the ones who tried hardest are mostly missing too. Now take the second definition. Winning means changing something. It means the game is different at the end than it was at the beginning because you were in it. Under this rule, the answer is clean and brutal because nobody wins. Not one person. Bunny Colvin comes closest, and the way he fails is the show's whole argument in one story. Hamsterdam works. That is not a small point, and the show is very careful about it. Violence drops. The corner's empty. Health workers get into a place they could never reach before. The experiment does what an experiment is supposed to do, which is produce a result. And it is destroyed anyway, not because it failed, but because it is politically impossible to defend in public. Colvin loses his rank and his pension, and the whole thing is bulldozed. The lesson is not that reform does not work. The lesson is that working is not the criterion. Cedric Daniels reaches the top of the department and is told to falsify the crime statistics, and he resigns instead. This is the most principled act by anybody in the show, and its effect on the world is precisely zero, because Valchek takes the chair and Juke the Stats gets juked. Daniels ends up arguing cases as a defense attorney in front of Rhonda Perlman, who is now a judge and has to recuse herself. Two of the most competent people in the justice system, having done everything right, end up on opposite sides of a courtroom in roles the system assigned them, unable to do anything about anything. Jimmy McNulty invents a serial killer. Think about how extreme that is as a strategy. He fabricates murders to force the department to fund real police work, which is the act of a man who has understood the machine completely and decided to feed it exactly the lie it responds to. And it works. The money appears. The wiretap goes up. Marlo gets caught. And then the case is buried anyway, because prosecuting it would expose the fraud that made it possible. and the institution protects itself the way it always does. McNulty beats the machine at its own game, and the machine simply declines to pay out. Stringer Bell tries to change the game more ambitiously than anyone. His entire project is to convert a drug organization into a legitimate business, to replace violence with economics, to make the whole thing rational. He dies in a half-finished building he was developing, killed by two men from the world he was trying to leave, after being sold out by his oldest friend and swindled by a state senator who understood him better than he understood himself. So, under the second definition, there are no winners, and the pattern in the failures is the important part. Notice who fails worst. It is not the lazy or the stupid, it is the ambitious. The bigger the thing a character tries to change, the more completely he is destroyed. McNulty wants to take down an entire organization and ends up committing crimes to do it. Stringer wants to remake an economy and is murdered. Garcetti wants to fix a city and becomes an exact copy of the man he replaced, then leaves for a bigger office before the damage lands. Colvin wants to solve the drug war in one district and loses his career. The scale of your ambition in this show predicts the scale of your ruin almost perfectly. That observation is what opens the door to the third definition, and this is where the real answer is. Winning means you get to keep yourself. You come out the other end still recognizably the person you were trying to be, with your own account of your life intact. Under this rule, there are winners. There are not many, and they are almost all people who narrowed what they were responsible for until it fit inside their actual reach. Bubbles is the answer. If the show has a single victory, it is his, and it is worth being precise about why. He starts as the least powerful person in Baltimore. He is an addict and an informant, which means he is used by everyone and protected by no one. He is not a soldier or a police or a politician. He has no rank in any structure. Over 5 seasons, he loses almost everything a person can lose, including a boy he was trying to look after, which he caused, and which nearly ends him. And his ending is not that he gets rich, or gets vindicated, or gets anybody arrested. His ending is that he is allowed to come upstairs. He has been living in his sister's basement, permitted in the house but not in the life, eating separately. Kept at the distance, you keep somebody you cannot trust yet. In the final hour, he is clean, and he walks up the stairs and sits down at the table and eats dinner with his family. That is the whole prize. It is a staircase and a kitchen. And the show films it like the most important thing that happens in 60 hours, because it is. Look at how he gets there, because it inverts everything every other character believes. Every ambitious person in this series wins by being self-sufficient, by working an angle, by needing nobody. Bubbles gets there by admitting he cannot do it alone. He goes to meetings. He leans on Wallan. He tells the truth about the worst thing he ever did, out loud, to a room, and then to a reporter. His victory is built entirely out of the thing the rest of the show treats as fatal weakness, which is dependence on other people. In an institution, needing help gets you eaten. Bubbles wins by finally standing outside every institution and asking for help anyway. Then there is Bunk Moreland, and his win is easy to miss because so little happens to him. Bunk does not chase anything. He does not scheme for promotion. He does not fake evidence. He does not go over anybody's head. He does not try to fix the department. He works murders. He works them well. When McNulty asks him to help with the fake serial killer, he refuses, and he keeps refusing, and he tells McNulty exactly what he is. At the end of the show, he is still in homicide, still doing the job, still the same man. Nothing has been added to him, and nothing has been taken away. The show's respect for Bunk is expressed by how boring his ending is. He is the only major police officer who is neither corrupted, broken, promoted out of the work, nor destroyed by it. He achieves that by never once trying to do anything larger than the case in front of him. He has understood something nobody else in the department has, which is that the case in front of you is the only unit of work you actually control, and treating it as the whole job is not surrender, it is accuracy. Lester Freeman wins too, and his is the most sophisticated victory in the show, because he wins by knowing when to leave. Lester plays the game at the highest level anybody plays it. He is the best investigator in Baltimore, and he is the only person who consistently sees the whole board, following money into places nobody else will look. He is also the person who understands the illegal side of McNulty's scheme best and uses it most effectively. And when it collapses, he negotiates, takes the deal, and walks out with his full pension. The last we see of him, he is at home making miniature furniture with a woman he loves, in a life he chose. He got everything the job could give him, and then he folded his hand at exactly the moment the game stopped paying. Compare that with McNulty, who cannot stop, who has to be forcibly removed, who ends the series driving a homeless man back to Baltimore because he still cannot leave a loose end alone. Same intelligence, same case, same fraud. One of them knew when it was over. Prez wins, and his win says something specific about institutions that is easy to miss. He is a disaster as a police officer. He is dangerous with a gun, he blinds a child, he shoots another officer, and in the schools he turns out to be good, patient, genuinely gifted with the kids nobody else can reach. He does not fix the school system. He does not even manage to save the one student he most wants to save, and the show refuses to spare him that because in the last hour, Dookie borrows money from him with a lie they both understand and goes off to get high. But Prez keeps the classroom. He gets one room with children in it and does one thing well inside it, permanently. That is the same shape as Bunk and the same shape as Cuddy, who gets a gym and some kids and no larger claim. It is the shape of every genuine win in the show. Reduce your scope until it matches your actual power, then work. Naaman Bryce is the one rescue that works, and the show is scrupulously honest about why. He is not saved by a program, a policy, a school, or a system. He is saved because one specific well-connected adult with money and standing reached into his life and physically removed him. Colvin takes him home. That is the only thing that works, and it works for exactly one child, and the show puts Michael, Randy, and Dookie in the same frame to make sure you understand that the method does not scale. One kid gets out because one man happened to care and happened to have the resources. That is not a solution. It is a rounding error with a face. Now hold all of that up against Marlo Stanfield, because Marlo is the trap the question is built around. Under the first definition, Marlo wins more completely than anyone. He is free, he is rich, the case against him evaporates, and the price he pays is that he has to stay out of the drug trade, which at his level of wealth is not obviously a punishment at all. He stands in a room full of developers and lawyers, dressed well, being introduced as a man with capital. Every material thing he ever wanted is in that room, and he cannot stand it. He walks out. He goes to a corner at night and finds two young dealers telling stories about Omar, arguing about how Omar died and what Omar did, and neither of them knows who Marlo is. His name means nothing there. Omar, who is dead, has a name that lives on the corner, and Marlo, who is alive and rich and won, has nothing. So he provokes them, and they cut his arm, and he stands there bleeding and shouting into the dark, and that is the last we see of him. That scene is the show's answer to its own question, delivered as a joke with a knife in it. Marlo spent 5 seasons insisting that his name was the only thing that mattered, that his name was his name, that respect was the actual currency, and money was just how you keep score. Then he took the deal, and the deal converted his name into money, and he discovered that the exchange only runs one way. You can sell the name for the money. You cannot buy the name back. And there is a further cruelty in it, because Stringer Bell died trying to make exactly that trade in the other direction. Stringer wanted to convert the name into legitimate capital, and was killed for not respecting the name enough. Marlo completes the transaction, Stringer died attempting, gets the money, gets out clean, and finds out there was nothing on the other side. The show lets one man die for the thing and the other man get it, and shows you that both outcomes are empty. That is a much colder statement than either death would have been alone. So, if the clean winner cannot tolerate winning, and the reformers all lose, and the survivors all won by shrinking, what is actually left standing at the end? The answer is in the last 10 minutes, and it is delivered almost entirely through editing rather than dialogue, which is why it is easy to feel and hard to summarize. Sydnor stands in a judge's chambers, furious about a department that will not let him do real police work, saying almost exactly what McNulty said to the same judge in the first hour of the first season. Michael takes a shotgun into a rim shop, robs the man inside, and shoots him in the knee, which is Omar's method performed by a boy who is becoming Omar. Dookie is in an alley with a needle, which is where Bubbles was when we met him. Slim Charles kills Cheese in the middle of a meeting and becomes the man Proposition Joe used to be. Valchek sits in Burrell's chair. Carcetti moves into the governor's mansion, and Nerese Campbell moves into his. Templeton takes the prize, and Gus Haynes watches from the copy desk. Every seat gets refilled. Not one of them stays empty for a single beat. That is the structural answer to who won, and it is not a person. The positions won. The chairs won. The show spends 60 hours making you care about individuals, and then demonstrates in a few minutes of cutting that every one of those individuals was occupying a slot that the city had already prepared and would fill again immediately. The names on the board change, the board does not. This is why the question who won is a slightly wrong question, and why the show wants you to notice that. Winning implies a game that ends. Every season of The Wire is built to feel like a case with a conclusion, and every conclusion resets the board with new names in old seats. There is no final whistle. In a game that does not end, coming out ahead is not a coherent goal, because ahead of what and measured when, which leaves only two things that winning can honestly mean in a world like that. You can extract as much as possible before a buzzer that never sounds, which is what Levy and Carcetti and Templeton and Valchek do, and which the show renders as a series of small, hollow, well-dressed men getting exactly what they asked for. Or you can get out with yourself intact, which is what Bubbles and Bunk and Lester and Prez do, and which the show renders as the only thing on screen that feels like joy. The series has an opinion about which one counts, and it expresses that opinion through the camera rather than through argument. Nobody in the show delivers a speech about it. Instead, the wealthy winners are filmed as isolated and slightly ridiculous. Marlowe bleeding on a corner, nobody knows him on, Templeton in a room applauding a lie, Carcetti waving at a crowd that will feel about him exactly the way he felt about the last mayor. Meanwhile, a recovering addict is allowed to eat dinner upstairs, and the show treats it like a coronation. There is one more candidate for the winner, and it is the one the show's own creators would probably name, which is the city. Baltimore is the actual protagonist of The Wire, and every person in it turns out to be a component. The city outlasts Avon and Stringer and Marlowe. It outlasts Burrell and Rawls and Daniels. It outlasts Bodie and Wallace and Omar. It absorbs every reform, metabolizes every scandal, refills every position, and continues. If you insist on naming a winner, the city is the only entity that is undefeated. But it wins the way weather wins, or the way a river wins against a man swimming in it. Not by beating him. Just by still being there when he is not. That is not a victory anybody can be proud of or take credit for, and it does not require the city to be malicious. The system does not hate anyone in this show. It simply does not have any mechanism for caring, and things without a mechanism for caring will always outlast the people who do. So here is the answer, as clearly as it can be put. Nobody wins, The Wire at the scale the characters keep trying to win at, because that scale is not a real place. The institutions cannot be beaten, only served or survived. The people who serve them well get money and rank, and the strange emptiness the show reserves for its successful men. The people who try to beat them get destroyed in proportion to how hard they tried. And a small handful of people, most of them holding no power at all, win completely and permanently by giving up on the big game and taking responsibility for something small enough to actually hold. Bunk gets a case, Prez gets a classroom, Cuddy gets a gym, Lester gets a workbench and a woman he loves. Colvin gets one boy. Bubbles gets a staircase and a place at the table. None of that changes Baltimore, and the show does not pretend otherwise. That is exactly why it counts. Those are the only outcomes in 60 hours that nobody else can take away, because they do not depend on anybody's permission, do not sit inside any organization's gift, and cannot be reversed by the next election, or the next commissioner, or the next man in the chair. Everything the winners in the first group have can be removed by whoever comes next. Nothing Bubbles has can be. The Wire is usually described as a show about how systems crush people, and that description is accurate but incomplete because it stops one step short of the actual argument. The show is not simply saying the system wins. It is saying that the system wins the only contest it is capable of entering, which is the contest for control of the board, and that a person who accepts this early enough can go and win something else instead. Something smaller, unimpressive, invisible from any distance, and entirely his own. The last thing the show wants you to understand is that this is not a consolation prize. Marlowe has the money and would trade all of it to be spoken about the way dead Omar is spoken about. Bubbles has nothing at all and would not trade places with him. The show puts both men on screen in the same final hour so that you can see them next to each other and work out which one of them actually got what he wanted. That is who won. Not the men in the chairs, because the chairs were never theirs and were always going to be handed to someone else. The people who won are the ones who stopped playing for the board and started playing for themselves And the reason it looks like such a small victory is that everything real in this show is small. The big things were always the lie.